Okay, so one of the biggest problems that I encounter with students comes in towards the downswing, and it's golfers which are really desperately trying to blend how to sequence the downswing. They know that there are benefits that they get told about by learning how to rotate through the ball, but they're also aware that you're supposed to allow the club to drop down. And the blend of those two things often becomes quite problematic. Now, in my experience, what tends to happen with golfers who try and trigger rotational motion in the downswing, particularly when they start trying to focus on the lower body and maybe the chest rotating towards the target, it'll feel great. It'll feel quite liberated, but you'll always be fighting these sort of tendencies of over the top, and you'll just feel like that goes against the grain of what should be natural. So the problem, in my opinion, is when golfers start focusing on rotation, what happens is that they lose sight of a really important aspect, which is known as maintaining hip depth. So from face on and side on, if I was to demonstrate the sort of, if you like, incorrect rotational move, it would be sort of something that would look like this. Now, from the side perspective, it's probably more compelling. So if I sort of swing back and do it again, now I am triggering a rotation here as I start this sort of downswing position, but you can kind of see the way that my hands and everything maybe get out a little bit too far in front of me. Now, the difference is, you see, is when you start to think more about the term of hip depth. So if I now drew a line on the back of my hips, what we're really trying to do as we start this downswing is get this left hip moving back behind you. Now, as I do this type of motion and I keep my head still, can you see the way now that my right shoulder will simultaneously sort of drop downwards? As opposed to if I move this way, I'm still rotating, but you can see that I would say the difference between this is kind of me moving my right hip forward, so my right shoulder goes over, this is over the top. If I think more about left hip back, can you see the difference that it has on the influence of the whole sequence? So in the golf swing, you fundamentally want to make sure that you are triggering rotation. You can do whatever you want with your hands and arms. If you feel comfortable letting your arms drop or trying to hold, whatever. We'll come back to that in a separate video, but to not lose sight of what's really important with this rotational movement is you need to train and to practice this left hip backward motion. Now, what you'll see from the face-on perspective when I do this drill and I get this left hip moving back is, as long as I keep my head still, can you see the way that my left shoulder will go more upward? And that's what's happening. So the best way you can visualize this is that the more hip depth you're able to hold on to or to create, the more it will fundamentally tilt the pelvis. So if I face you guys, if I go back like so, can you see the way if I rotate incorrectly, like we talked about at the beginning of the video, can you see the way my pelvis would be quite horizontal and my right shoulder would come over? If I pull the left hip back more, it'll now theoretically tilt the pelvis more, so therefore my shoulders will become more tilted, which is what will help this right shoulder drop downward. And that's what you need to do. Now, the reason why you have to try and get this blend as best as you can in terms of understanding how to rotate whilst having this ability to retain hip depth is it will obviously help you stay in posture. But more fundamentally, the big problem for most amateur golfers is in the downswing position comes with your hands and arms. So most golfers, their arms tend to kind of, get stuck like so, and the hands, by the time you hit the ball, are normally behind the club head, so it gets too flicky and too scoopy. The reason why this is happening is because the shoulder is like way back here out of position. See, when you learn the correct pivoting action, see my right shoulder drops right underneath my chin, which now means I can extend this arm through that hitting zone. Whilst if I sort of pivot like this, see how high my shoulder is, I'm always going to run out of space with this right arm. Because if you were thinking about it from a sheer distance between my hand and my right shoulder, if I want to demonstrate an impact position like so, my shoulder has to be in a certain location. But what I'm saying is, if you start the downswing and just think about right shoulder down, it's too wide, you'll always run out. So you have to understand how to rotate correctly. So the real easy drill is just literally to place an object behind you at home and just sort of practice. So if I kind of imagine this line represents like a chair, and just get the feeling of my left hip moving or your lead hip just moving back into this object, and it will obviously give you a sense of being much lower. And if you can accompany that with the feelings that I've talked about recently on the channel, where you allow stuff like your chest and your pelvis and your upper part, your lead leg, to move to the target with you, it'll feel peculiar in terms of the position and, if you like, the orientation that you're in, but it won't feel peculiar or stressful. If you're somebody who gets this leg in the wrong position, you'll feel that's quite tight and uncomfortable. You understand how to just rotate, it should feel as liberated as skimming a stone. So you need to work on it, because the big shoulder move that you don't want is when you kind of do this and then you get terrified that it's an over the top move. and you don't necessarily want to just get the feeling of dropping the shoulder down, because then you're going to get stuck. You do have to learn how to trigger rotation while simultaneously learning how to maintain hip depth, because if you can do both of those, it'll influence the shoulders and it will help you hit the ball so much better. See you soon.